Yo, what's going on? Welcome back to the Bring the Sink podcast. I'm your host, Justin Hamroun, aka The Hammer. I'll explain here in a minute. And we got a good one for you. We got part 2 of the best games of the NFL 2025-2026 season. We're going weeks 7 through 12 this week, so let's get rolling. First off, let's explain the nickname. I was working out with one of my coworkers earlier, and he was really pushing me hard. And if you're listening to this, shout out to you because you know who you are. And he was like, come on, bro, let's go. You're the Hammer. Because we refer to each other by our last names. He's like, Hamroun, the Hammer, let's go. So, for now and from here on out, for all intents and purposes, I'm referring to myself as the Hammer, and I'm not going to explain that again. So, well, hopefully, don't hold me to that. Anyways, let's get right into it. Week 7 was an awesome NFL week for the most part because we started out with a banger on Thursday night with the Pittsburgh Steelers going up against the Cincinnati Bengals, in which Joe Flacco upset the Pittsburgh Steelers and Aaron Rodgers and company 33-31. This game was awesome. There was not a lot of defense being played. Joe Flacco was just tossing the ball to Jamar Chase literally every single time. I'm pretty sure Jamar Chase ended with like either 16 or 18 receptions. Here, let's double check that real quick. Yeah, 16 receptions for 161 yards and 1 touchdown. What a day. And then T. Higgins also added and contributed to that with 6 receptions for 96 yards and a touchdown as well. So all in all, an awesome game. Defense was optional. Joe Flacco showed that he could still do it, and he was still doing things, man. And after starting off the season with the low-life Browns, he gets traded to the Bengals, and then Mike Tomlin was kind of panicking a little bit. He's like, I just don't understand how you can look up somebody or look so highly of somebody and then trade him to a division rival. He's like, I don't understand it. He's like, maybe Andrew Berry knows something that I don't. And I guess Andrew Berry didn't know, because Joe Flacco, he still had it in him, man. 342 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Yeah, have a day, Joe Flacco. This was an awesome start to week 7, and it only got better because later on in the week, in the early slate, we had the Eagles going up against the Vikings, in which the Eagles barely edged out the Vikings 28-22, which was a lot better of a game than I thought it was going to be, because it ended up being Carson Wentz playing against the Eagles. And watching this game, I thought Carson Wentz has a shot, and it didn't. It came down to the Eagles converting on a late third down inside of 2 minutes for them to finally seal the game on a 1-possession game in Minnesota and beat Carson Wentz and kind of not allow him to exact revenge upon the Philadelphia Eagles. So that was an awesome game for the early slate. But my 100% game of the week, the lock of week 7, has to be the Giants coming into Denver and facing the Denver Broncos, in which the Broncos were coming off a very, very ugly win that you can learn more about in episode 13 of Bring the Sink, against the New York Jets. And they were facing another New York team, this time in Denver, back at home. Throughout the first 3 quarters of the game, this game was looking extremely ugly, honestly even more ugly than the previous week, because there was very little chance of us winning this game at that point. At least it was less than a 1% chance of victory going into the fourth quarter, down 19-0. You score a touchdown, you go for 2, you're down 19-8, in which the Giants immediately score another touchdown on the ensuing drive to make it 26-8 with like 12 or 13 minutes left in the ball game. I had knocked this one down, or I had wrote this one down as a loss, marked it down. I was like, man, better luck next week. Let's just get ready for next week, because this has been ugly. And the entire time leading up to that week, the social media discourse between Giants and Broncos was getting real toxic, because Jonathan Cooper said some comments about Jackson Dart, about how he's a young guy, he's doing his thing and he's dancing, he's wearing the chains, and a lot of Giants players and fans took that as disrespect, and so there was definitely some added fuel to the fire here. And this was when the Giants were at the peak of their abilities throughout the year, because they had a healthy Cam Scatterbo. There wasn't a whole lot of film on Jackson Dart, so you didn't really know how to stop him, But sure enough, the Broncos ended the game by scoring 33 fourth quarter points, which has never been done before, and ended up coming back, which I believe they were either the second or third team in NFL history out of like 4,000 teams to be down by over 19 points in the fourth quarter and still win the ball game. So this is like one of the games, or one of the best games of the entire year, not just of the week. This is a candidate for game of the year for sure. So the Broncos end up winning 33-32, and it was special too because after taking the lead 30-26, the Giants then got the ball with less than 2 minutes to go. They got a questionable pass interference penalty, in which set them up at the 1 yard line, and then scored a touchdown off of a QB read option with Jackson Dart, which wasn't initially called as a touchdown. But after further review, they scored the touchdown. They missed the extra point, which then allowed Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos to drive down, get into field goal range, and allow Big Nuts Lutz to do the rest. So it was honestly one of the best, most exciting games. You know, there was people in my life who have never watched a down of football or have ever even cared about football that were talking to me about this game in the ensuing week afterwards. Like, it was crazy. I've never seen anything like it. Like, this was a special victory, one of the greatest comebacks I've ever seen in my life, and honestly, I can't think of one better in terms of a regular season comeback. So, that'll be it for week 7. Let's move on to week 8. Actually, let me look over. There was a cool there was a good Packers-Cardinals game in which the Packers won 27-23, but I don't think anybody cared about that after seeing a team score 33 points in one game. So, moving on to week 8. Thursday night was a bummer. You had Chargers beating the snot out of the Vikings 37-10. There was not a lot of good games this week. I'm missing one. There's the Jets barely beating the Bengals 39-38. I'm not gonna lie, I did not pay attention to this game too much, but from the times that I would look over and it would have they would show the highlights on Red Zone, it was like, wow, the Jets are doing it, man. This is crazy, and it was their first win of the season, and it came like the week or the weekend of Nick Mangold's passing. So this was a special victory. I was happy for Aaron Glenn. Like, this was an awesome victory for the New York Jets. It was because those first 7 weeks, that was just an absolute bummer for the Jets, and honestly, this entire season was a bummer, but I'm glad they were able to get this W against the Bengals, especially with all those totality of circumstances with Nick Mangold's passing and everything. So that was definitely a great game to watch. I'm looking there. This week was actually kind of a bummer. Week 8, besides the Jets and Bengals, every other game was a multiple possession game. There was, the Broncos handily beat the Cowboys 44-24. The Colts crushed the Titans. The Packers beat the Steelers on Sunday Night Football 35-25, in which I think that was Rodgers' first time playing against his former team, but obviously not in Lambeau. This was in Pittsburgh, but he couldn't get the job done. And then Monday Night Football, it was the Chiefs crushing the Commanders 28-7. So this was kind of a bummer of a week, not gonna lie, but there was a lot of teams on byes, so can't really fault them too much for that. Now moving on to week 9, it also started out with a bummer game with the Ravens crushing the Dolphins 28-6 in Lamar's return. This is another contender for game of the year, not just game of the week, but game of the year. The Bears versus the Bengals. Golly, man, this was an awesome game. Man, I can't believe this was week 8. Week 9. It's like this. I feel like this game just happened yesterday. The Bears beat the Bengals 47-42. 89 combined points. Defense was totally optional. And then I remember at the end of the game, there was less than a minute left. Caleb Williams had the ball. They were driving down. They were trying to get a field goal. I don't think they even had a timeout left. They were down 41-42. They hit Colston Loveland. Colston Loveland bounces off 3 guys and ends up running it in for a touchdown after like 60 yards or something. This was crazy. It was one of the craziest games. And what was even better about this game? I'm getting ahead of myself. Like, I keep stuttering because of how excited I am about this game. this game, man, what made this game even better was the post-game reactions from all of the Bengals offensive stars, like Jamar Chase and Chase Brown. All of these guys, when they were getting interviewed by the reporters in the locker room, they were like, we just need one effing stop. I can't believe we can't get one effing stop. It was like, this is some gold right here. This is journalistic gold. I can't believe they're saying this right now. But, at the end of the day, I understand. You score 42 points and you still can't win the ball game. That's pretty unacceptable. This was definitely the peak of the suboptimal defense from the Bengals, if you will. And then we also had a awesome game between the Vikings and the Lions, in which the Vikings beat the Lions in Detroit 27-24. 9. J.J. McCarthy got his W and kind of started the spoiler season for the Lions, and then they ultimately ended the season later on. We'll get into that in the next episode. Excuse me. Wow, I need to conduct myself. We also had a huge upset in the Panthers beating the Packers in Green Bay, in which was probably Jordan Love's worst performance as a Packers starter that I think I've ever seen, where, there was specifically one play where he was dancing around, it was 4th down, and then he just tosses up a duck. He just tosses up a dually up into the end zone, and it was such an easy ball to catch, and it went straight. And I mean straight into the defender's arms. There was nobody around him within like 10 yards. It was such an easy play to make. I don't think he was used to making that kind of a play, and it just bounced off of his hands. Now, honestly, it was probably for the best that it bounced off of his hands, because it was 4th down, so they ended up taking over possession like 20 yards down the field. So, who knows? Maybe he could have returned it for farther than that, but it was probably for the best that he dropped that interception. But I remember that was like one of the most hilarious near miss interceptions that I think I've seen all year. That's definitely one of the most memorable things that I remember from this game. We also had the Broncos going into Houston and beating the Texans 18-15 for another game-winning drive for Bo Nix and company. So that was awesome to see. We had the Patriots barely beating the Falcons 24-23 off of a missed extra point by Parker Romo, in which Michael Penix was really pushing pedal to the metal against the Patriots, and they barely squeezed by for their 7th win of the year out of 9 total games. This was also an awesome game. This was just an awesome week of football. We had the Steelers beating the Colts 27-20 after the Colts turned the ball over 6 times, and they were riding sky high. They were 7-1, and then they went into Pittsburgh. They were actually favorites going into Pittsburgh, and they ended up losing the game after, they ended up losing by 1 possession after committing 6 turnovers. So you're like, I think the Colts will be fine. If they only lose by 7 after turning the ball over 6 times, I think they'll be all right. We had the Chargers beating the Titans 27-20 in one of the least memorable games that I think I've ever seen in my life. Let's see. Oh, we had the Jaguars barely beating the Raiders 30-29, and I believe this was the one where the Raiders went for 2 at the end of the game to win it, and they did not convert, so the Jaguars ended up holding on to win 30-29. I'm telling you guys, this was a banger of a week, man, because we also had the Bills beating the Chiefs and ultimately leading to the Chiefs' downfall. And they pushed the Chiefs to 5-4, and they beat them 28-21 after some almost near Mahomes' 4th quarter magic. The Bills were able to hold on securely and win that game, go home with a W. The primetime games were kind of bummers, and that'll be all she wrote for Week 9. Let's go to Week 10. Week 10 started off with one of the worst Thursday night football games I think I've ever seen in my entire life, with the Broncos barely beating the Raiders 10-7 in a cold, windy, and sloppy night in which I don't think either team wanted to win or even wanted to be there, but that's just Thursday night football in general. Then we had probably the best international game of all time, in which the Colts beat the Falcons 31-25, and Jonathan Taylor probably 100% got drug tested after this game because he just went berserk on that Falcons. I remember I ended up having to watch this game later on because I slept in. I didn't wake up early enough for a lot of these international games. I ended up just catching up with them later on. But when I woke up and I checked my fantasy app and I saw that Jonathan Taylor had like 50 points or whatever, I was like, well, I lost, and it's not even 11 a.m. This is this is crazy, you know. So, but in the leagues that I did have Jonathan Taylor in, I was eating good that week. So that was awesome. We also had the Bears beating the Giants 24-20 in a snow game in which Jackson Dart had to exit the game. So we had Russell Wilson. I'm pretty sure I still hold on to the belief that if Jackson Dart played that entire game, I think the Giants would have won that game. But the Bears were getting blessed with a lot of these victories back to back, and honestly, good for them. There's not a single franchise in the NFL that deserves it more than them. So that was good to see. We had the Texans with Davis Mills beating the Jaguars 36-29, and I'm 99% sure. I'm not even going to double check this. I'm 99% sure that the Texans were down 29-10 and then ended up scoring 26 unanswered points to beat the Jags. Like this was an awesome game. I thought it was over when I saw 29-10, and then when the Texans just started coming back, they scored like 3 unanswered touchdowns. I was like, oh wow, this is crazy. And I think they also scored a touchdown as time expired too to make it 36-29. I think it was like 30-29, and then Trevor Lawrence like fumbled at like the 20-yard line or something, and then the Texans scored another touchdown as time expired. So whoever is a point spread watcher, I'm sure that they were either ecstatic or a little suicidal about that. But it's just, I guess that's what you get for playing or betting the spread. So we also had the Jets beating the Browns 27-20, in which this was a game that nobody, and I mean nobody, wanted to watch, but it was actually a lot of fun to watch. The people that did watch ended up getting a treat. It was pretty cool. And then, the Patriots going into Tampa Bay, back when Tampa Bay was still considered a good team, and beating them 28-23. And this was kind of Travion Henderson's breakout game, in which he got a handoff late in the fourth quarter, and he ran around the defense so fast that he looked back at his coaching staff and was like, "Should I score? Am I allowed to score? Should I take a knee?" That was one of the most incredible displays of athleticism that I think I've ever seen in my entire life. So, shout out to Travion Henderson. I wanted to draft him so bad, but he wasn't available, so we settled for R.J. Harvey. But I'm sure that they liked R.J. Harvey better, or at least that's what they'll tell you now, allegedly. So the afternoon slate were all multiple possession games, and not just by 2 possession. They were all 3 possession victories, and ultimately were not anything to really discuss. Same with the Sunday Night Football, with the Chargers beating the Steelers 25-10. And then we ended the week the same exact way that we started, with the Eagles beating the Packers 10-7. Thursday night we had a game 10-7. Monday night we had a game 10-7. Both equally as ugly, both equally as bad, but at least with the Eagles-Packers, it was better teams. It was playoff teams as opposed to the Broncos and the Raiders, in which only one of them were a playoff team. Moving on to week 11, this was actually one game that I woke up early enough to watch, the international game. We started off the early morning slate in the early morning slate for the Sunday games, with the Dolphins beating the Commanders 16-13. This was also another game I didn't really care for, but I just had it on, and watching it, I was like, oh wow, Mariota's making some plays, like this is cool. And then, oh wow, like Jalen Waddle's making some plays, so this was honestly a relatively solid game to watch. This was in Madrid as well, so that was pretty cool. I was watching the game in Spanish too. I love those Spanish commentators, man. And then we had the Panthers later on in the morning slate. We had the Panthers beating the Falcons 30-27. Also another great game. I'll be honest, this week I was actually in Mexico, so I did not get to watch a whole lot of these games up until later on, but once I started catching up on these games, I was like, wow, I missed a lot. When I was in Mexico, I found like the Mexican version of Red Zone. I think it was called like NFL Blitz or something, and that was electric, man. That was awesome. Watching the Panthers beating the Falcons like that, and then, watching the Bills beat the Buccaneers convincingly 44-32. Like, that was pretty cool. Obviously, the Bears beat the Vikings 19-17 in like the most 2025 Bears way possible. The Packers barely held on against the Giants, the 2-9 Giants, but they had famous Jameis Winston playing, and whenever Jameis is playing, that's must-watch television. I just got to tell you that right now. I'm a big Jameis Winston guy. I wouldn't necessarily like him on my own team, but I love watching Jameis Winston play football, man. Like, I am one of his biggest fans, and watching this Packers-Giants game with Jameis, it was like, wow, the Giants actually have a decent chance against the quote-unquote contending Packers. So that was really cool to see. But as I said earlier, I was in Mexico, and the reason, I'll just give you guys a little scoop, the reason I was out in Mexico was because I was meeting my lady's family for the first time, and as I was meeting my lady's family for the first time, I kind of knew that at some point during the trip, I was going to have to ask her parents, since I don't make the trip out there a whole lot, I had to ask her parents for their permission for me to propose at some point in time. I was watching, this was the week, if you guys remember, this was the week in which the Chiefs were playing up against the Broncos, and the Chiefs' backs were against the wall. So I was super nervous because I knew that the Chiefs were going to bring their A game, and I was praying hard, man. I was like, man, if the Broncos win this game. This was Sunday. I left on Tuesday, so I still had Sunday and Monday to ask her parents. But I was like, if the Broncos win this game, I'll ask her parents tonight. If they lose, I'm saving it for tomorrow. But if they win, I'm asking them tonight. And sure enough, Bo Nix had his fourth quarter game-winning drive magic, drove down the field, and Big Nuts Lutz kicked another field goal, another game-winning field goal. And as soon as that thing went through, I was ecstatic. I was celebrating. And then I was like, well, I guess I have to ask my lady's parents now. So, I didn't ask them immediately because, they were busy doing things. But, it was like I did hold up my end of the bargain, and I did end up asking them afterwards. So this one I remember specifically because this was one of the best days of my 2025 life. So, and honestly, probably my entire life. I was very happy. So, very grateful. And any day's a good day when the Broncos beat the Chiefs. Like, so that was this day this game will forever be held in my memory. So. We also had the Rams. Quick transition. We also had the Rams beating the Seahawks 21-19, in which I believe the Seahawks turned the ball over 3 or 4 times. So the fact that they turned it over so many times and they only lost by 2 points, it was like, wow, the Seahawks have come to play this year. And the writing should have been on the wall by week 10, saying, oh wow, this is or week 11, saying like, yeah, the Seahawks are here and they're contenders. And sure enough, they won the Super Bowl. So, looking back at it now, it's like hindsight is 20/20, but just even from looking at their losses and seeing how they lost these football games, it's like, yeah, we probably should have known that they would have made the Super Bowl this year. Sunday night, we had the Eagles beating the Lions 16-9. Honestly, it was kind of boring. The Lions kept going for it on 4th down like every single time, and they kept missing or not converting literally every single time. So not really much to discuss in that game besides what I just discussed. There was also a blatant missed pass interference penalty. Well, I wouldn't say missed. They just called it on the wrong guy. They called defensive pass interference when A.J. Brown pushed off. So I'm still kind of salty about that, even though it's like week 11, or even though it's like 3 months ago or whatever, 4 months ago or whatever. So, and then the Cowboys crushed the Raiders 33-16. And, I was watching this game for fantasy purposes, and I remember my lady's dad was like, he was kind of confused because I don't think he realized that I was watching it for fantasy purposes, because he was like, oh, this game is over. Why are you watching a 3-possession game with 4 minutes to go? It's like, oh, I need CeeDee Lamb to score a touchdown, man. So, yeah, I remember watching this, and sure enough, CeeDee Lamb did not get that touchdown, so I ended up losing that week. But it was all in all a great week. So can't really complain too much with how everything transpired. Moving on to week 12. We started off the week with an awesome Thursday night football game. We had the Bills going into Houston, playing the Houston Texans, and the Texans ended up beating them 23-19. Now, a funny story about this game is I was taking a little break from work, and I was getting some pho at this local spot that I've actually never been to. It was my first time ever, and I'm a big pho guy, but like I ordered a bowl of pho, and I had the game playing on my phone, on the Amazon Prime app or whatever, and I was watching and sipping on my little bowl, and the guy who brought me my food, he's like, "Oh, who's playing tonight?" And I was like, "Bills and Texans." And this was like early in the first quarter, and he goes, "Oh, I think the Bills got that one." And then he just walks away. I was like, "Oh, okay." Like, go off, man. like, the guy just unrattles a take and then just walks away. I love it. I love this energy. So, I mean, ultimately he was wrong, but it's cool. It's like I love people who just call their shot like that. So that was cool. Anytime I think about this game, I'll always think about that guy who just bringing me my food, that waiter or whatever, and just like, "Oh yeah, I think the Bills got that one," and then just like walks away. It was like this like older Vietnamese man too. So, yeah, if you can picture that, it's just that was awesome. Like, all right, like whatever you say. Then we also had the Bears beating the Steelers 31-28, and if I remember correctly, I don't believe that Aaron Rodgers played in this game because he was injured. Either that or he started the game and then he didn't finish. But either way, he was injured for at least some, if not all, of the game, and the Bears ended up holding on and beating the Steelers 31-28. Actually, now that I remember, I believe that Aaron Rodgers did not play this game at all. So Mason Rudolph came in, and he was doing his thing. They put up 28 points, but it was not enough to beat the Bears. So we also had the Patriots beating the Bengals 26-20. One thing that I really remember from this game was that the fact that Joe Flacco threw one of the worst pick sixes that I think I've ever seen in my life, where the ball took at least 4 seconds to get to the receiver that was like 7 yards away, and he just threw up an absolute Stevie, and like it was a gift. The Patriots defensive back just intercepted it, and everybody knew that he scored before he even caught the ball. Like that was bad, So this is one of those games where it's like, if Joe Burrow was healthy, this might have gone a little differently, but shoulda, woulda, coulda at the end of the day. We also had the Lions beating the Giants 34-27, another famous Jameis game, and Jameis was going in this game, man. He made one of the greatest plays of the entire season off of that trick play where he's the receiver, he catches the ball. I think it was like a reverse, like a couple of times end around reverse, and he ends up being the receiver, he catches a deep ball, and then breaks a tackle off of a linebacker and waltzes into the end zone. It's like, wow, is this guy really a quarterback? That was awesome. That was like a tight end play. Like, so that was really cool. We also had the Chiefs beating the Colts 23-20, and that was when the Chiefs were kind of gaining some steam again, and they were like, "Oh no, don't let the Chiefs into the playoffs." We were all like panicking, and then we kind of knew that the Colts were entering fraudulent territory, but we also didn't realize like how injured they were, especially Daniel Jones, because he was playing with a couple broken bones in his foot, or just in his leg in general. So that definitely limited the Colts offense quite a bit, and might have ended their season a little prematurely. Just looking over this slate, there was a lot of one possession games. Like this was kind of an awesome slate. We had the Cowboys beating the Eagles 24-20 after being down 21-0. Definitely one of the best games to watch all season long. We had the Jaguars beating the Cardinals 27-24, and when I saw this happen, I was like, I did not take the Jaguars seriously, because I was like, wait, you're beating the Cardinals with a backup quarterback 27-24? This is crazy, man. This is bad, Should we be panicking in Jacksonville? Like, that is not good. And I guess I just spoke a little too soon. Oh, yeah, here we go. I was like, wait, where was the other game? Yeah, then we had the Seahawks beating the Titans 30-24, and the Seahawks didn't really look their best in this game, but they still put up 30 points, and, the Titans were able to keep it close a little bit. I think they also had some help from their special teams, but for the most part, this was a lot better of a game than I thought it was going to be. I think the initial point spread was like 13.5 for the Seahawks, so for them to only win by 6 points. I mean, again, a win is a win, but like for them to only win by 6 against one of the worst teams in the league, it was quite interesting. It was like, wow, this is a lot more interesting than I thought it was going to be. And I am done. I can't believe it. I think that went by so fast. I was just cruising, and I was like, I was going to go to week 13, and I was like, no, because we're going to do 13 through 18, so we're going to do 6 games for each episode. So this is episode 14, I believe. Man, I can't believe that went by so fast. You know, it's like I kind of want to finish the whole thing, but at the end of the day, I don't want to make these episodes like 2 hours long either. So thank you guys so much for listening. You can find us at Apple Music, or I guess Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Spotify. This is The Hammer from Bring the Sink, and peace.